It's really a pleasure to be with all of you today to talk about the delivery of HIV services during the dual epidemic of HIV and COVID. Isa po ito sa mahalagang conversations na tingin ko ay kailangan pinag-uusapan natin, no? To discuss about what we learn from our experience, kasi sabi nga ng ating mga speakers kanina, mukhang we're in this for the long haul, no? So magandang pinag-uusapan natin ito. But before I start with my presentation, I'd like to first give a shout out to SHIP, as well as the other community-based organizations, no, in the Philippines who have played and continue to play a vital role in helping the PLHIV community, no, during this difficult time. So ito po yung overview ng aking presentation, no. Very quick lang na discussion on the dual epidemic or the intersection of HIV and COVID-19. Tapos magfo-focus na tayo dun sa response ng ating government and the community-based organizations, and then lessons and directions, no? We're going to look at recommendations on how we can improve HIV service implementation in the Philippines based on our experience of HIV and COVID. And then I'll end my presentation with some concluding thoughts. No? So ano yung dual epidemic of HIV and COVID? So we know that the Philippines now has one of the fastest growing HIV epidemics in the world. The first case of HIV in the Philippines was identified in 1984. However, makikita natin dito sa graph natin, no, that the epidemic really started to grow sometime around 2008. And currently, we have about 39 new HIV cases identified in the Philippines every day. No? Every day. So this tells us na yung epidemic natin is really growing fast, and it seems that we still have a very long way to go before we can end HIV in our country. No, as for COVID, we also know na medyo mahaba pa yung at marami pa yung kailangan natin gawin to end the COVID-19 pandemic in our country. And base dun sa tracker din na pinakita ng speakers natin kanina, no, we have about 3.7 million cases already in the country. And although we already have vaccinated around 60 to 70% of our population, nandyan pa rin yung risk for COVID, no? At marami pa tayong kailangan gawin. If we look at the two epidemics closely, no, this is data from 2020, nung medyo height pa nung or kaka-start pa lang nung pandemic. Now, if you look at the two epidemics closely, we'll see na yung mga groups ng tao na mostly affected ng virus are those who belong to the age 20 to 40 age group. Now, for HIV, I guess it's mostly because it is during this age, no, 20 to 40, where people are more sexually active and engage in risky sexual behaviors. For COVID, no, we can say na maybe it's because people in this age group engage in activities or are in situations that put them at a higher risk for contracting the virus. No, you'll notice na yung mga tao age 20 to 40 are also the ones who are in school or are working, and despite the health advice, especially in terms of quarantining, isolating, and despite the shift to online platforms for work and school, na may mga iba talaga sa atin na nahihirapan, no, or cannot quarantine or stay at home or isolate because they need to go to work, no. We know that not all workplaces then, unfortunately, can provide protection or enough protection for their workers, no. So that increases people's risk for contracting the virus. In terms of geography, no, or location, we can see that both HIV, again, this is in the beginning of the pandemic, no, most of the cases have epicenters in Metro Manila, no. So for COVID-19, we can say that it could be because the population there is more dense, no, and there's very limited space to physically distance from others. And also, I think because, Metro Manila is a parang travel hub siya, no? So, travelers, both foreign and domestic, might have been exposed to certain viruses, tapos dun na nadadala, no, sa Manila yung virus. Also, we can argue that the high number of identified cases in Metro Manila, both for HIV and COVID, maybe because there's more testing, no, that is being done in these areas compared to other areas in the Philippines. So just looking at the trends, no, we can see that, and we can say that as a country, parang mukhang medyo kulang pa, yung ginagawa natin. Marami na tayong nagawa, pero meron pang pwedeng gawin in terms of addressing the dual epidemic of HIV and COVID. And this can be very challenging, no, for people living with HIV, especially because we don't know yet exactly, no. There's parang may data naman, pero hindi pa ganun ka sobrang dami yung data in terms of how COVID-19 affects people living with HIV. We don't know yet exactly how the two viruses interact with each other. What we do know, however, no, or rather what we believe in is that people living with HIV who are on effective treatment, and ito nabanggit din ng speakers natin kanina, those the PhIV who are on effective treatment have the same risk for COVID-19 as people who do not have HIV. Very important to note na people who have weakened immune systems might be at an increased risk, no, for severe illness. And this means that we need to ensure, no, that people living with HIV are on effective treatment during the pandemic. Sabi nga ni Doc Eva kanina, hindi pa to tapos, no? We're still in a pandemic. And for those who are not yet on treatment, no, we need to make sure na they are linked to care and provided treatment, no? But that's not easy to do, no, given na maraming challenges ang dinala ng pandemic na to sa service provision natin. Travel was restricted, no? Travel was restricted, community quarantines were implemented. So, and justified naman yon kasi the goal was to limit the transmission of the virus, no? Some hospitals were also designated as COVID referral hospitals to address the increasing number of COVID cases in the country. So yung testing capacity nila for HIV medyo nabawasan, or yung iba nga talaga totally nag-stop, no? Again, these are necessary measures na kailangan gawin, no, to address the COVID-19 pandemic, but they posted certain challenges to the delivery of HIV services to PLHIV, which consequently ay na-impactan yung kanilang health. Now, to address this, no, meron namang ginawa yung ating government, no, in March 2020, the government released an advisory to ensure the continuous delivery of HIV services to PLHIV. Nakasulat doon sa advisory na ito that to address the challenge of travel restrictions, no, nag-direct sila na yung LGUs can use government vehicles for ARV delivery and also allowed the use of courier service for pickup and delivery of ARVs. Tapos covered din ng OHAT yung karamihan sa cost ng courier services na ito. Also, no, to ensure that PLHIV can have access to DOH-accredited treatment hubs for urgent cases, nag-allow sila ng use ng electronic or SMS appointment. So, pwede kang mag-text sa kanila sa treatment hubs mo. And then, you can use that as proof of entry, to allow you entry rather, in areas under ECQ. Kasi di ba nga, nung ECQ, ang pwede lang lumabas are frontliners, no? So, itong advisory na to, nagsasabi na as long as you have that text from your treatment hub, na pwede ka ang lumabas, you can pass through certain checkpoints, no, under yung ECQ. Additionally, no, the DOH directed yung treatment hubs natin to cater to all PLHIVs regardless of their affiliation to treatment hubs. Kasi ang case dati is you can only get your medications from your affiliated na treatment hubs. During the pandemic, based dito sa advisory, no, kunwari, ang treatment hub mo ay nasa Maynila pero umuwi ka ng probinsya, ngayon pwede ka nang kumuha ng medication mo dun sa treatment hub sa probinsya. You just need to coordinate with them para yung mga records and everything are noted, no? So this advisory is really needed, no? During the dual epidemic also of HIV and COVID, maraming response din na ginawa yung ating community-based organizations, no? The delivery of HIV services remained challenging, no? From the start naman, nagsastruggle na rin yung government natin in terms of addressing the HIV epidemic in the country. Tapos mas nahirapan pa, no, nung dumating yung COVID. And recognizing yung challenges na ito, nag-step in and nag-step up palalo yung ating community, HIV-focused community-based organizations to make sure that PLHIV are provided continuous treatment, support, and care during the pandemic. And so, nung March 2020, no, I reached out to some community-based organizations, no, because I wanted to know ano yung mga challenges na kinakaharap ninyo, no, how are you adapting your services, paano nyo ini-implement yung mga changes na kinailangan yung gawin because of the pandemic, and we came up with this article that we posted on Rappler, no, and this is what they told me. No, this is what they told me. They said that because of the enhanced community quarantines, no, they now have limited capacity to provide HIV treatment and care services, particularly in terms of doing HIV testing, no, and viral load testing. Tapos kung nakakagawa man ng HIV testing, medyo delayed yung reporting ng test kasi nga yung priority was COVID, no, during that time. And for viral load testing, decreased talaga yung capacity kasi kunwari yung PGH, which is one of the institutions na nag-viral load testing, no, they were designated as a COVID-19 facility. So bawasan yung capacity nila to conduct viral load testing. So nag-discontinue sila for a time, and they just took note of who were requesting para eventually nung binaba na yung ECQ, no, na nakapag-reach out din sila dun sa mga nag-inquire to be tested, no. Isang malaking tulong na sinasabi ng CBO partners natin was the use of skeletal workforce, no, especially for urgent cases kasi hindi naman lahat ng staff nila ay pwedeng pumunta, so skeletal workforce lang siya, so 1 or 2 persons lang, tapos hindi siya halos everyday yung pag-report nila to work, no. It's important to note when we talk about testing during the dual epidemic na nung mga first part kasi nung pandemic, nakikita natin na bumaba, no, yung testing, yung numbers rather ng HIV cases na identified. But it's important to note that it's not really reflective ng bumababa ng number ng HIV cases in the country, but rather a reflection of low testing capacity, no? So mahalagang lagi nating banggitin yon kasi minsan iniisip nila na nung nag-pandemic bumaba kumonti yung cases ng HIV natin, no? That hopefully that's true, but chances are it's not true, no? It's mostly because we had low testing capacity, no? Another concern, no, or challenge na kinaharap nung ating mga CBO partners was that they had limited access to HIV treatment and care services. This is, I guess, on the part of the clients, no. Again, HIV testing and counseling, no. These are services that were usually done in person and in treatment hubs. Tapos dahil nga merong travel restrictions, no, yung iba hindi nakapagpa-test or hindi nakakapunta sa testing sites nila at hindi nakakapag-counseling. So what was the response of the CBO partners natin? They shifted to online platforms, no? They shifted to online platforms, and yung consultations and services nila minsan ginagawa na nila on via Zoom, via Google Meet, no, yung iba sa social media platforms lang like Facebook Messengers, no. This is good kasi na-continue yung service natin, no, na mahalaga kasi malaki yung impact ng pandemic sa mental health natin. But also we have to note na there are some concerns, no, in terms of confidentiality of patient information, no. What else? Ito yung mga CBO responses natin, no? So, maraming nag-set up nung, existing naman siya before, pero na-strengthen lang, no? Meron mga response centers, no? Etc. Another, and I think this is the last na challenge na sinabi sa atin ng CBO partners natin was yung disruption ng supply and distribution chain for ARV medication and condoms and basic needs, no? Yung pinaka naging concern nila was how to distribute ARV medications to those outside of Metro Manila, no? Because naging limited yung travel natin, most delivery companies have suspended their operations. So even if meron tayong mga treatment hubs or partners outside of Metro Manila, ang struggle was how do we send medication and goods to them, no? And yung provision ng basic needs, and this is for CBOs who provide housing for PLHIV, nauubusan na sila ng mga stock ng pagkain nila, ng basic needs nila, mga sabon, etc. What was the response of the CBO, no? Dun sa supply and distribution ng medication and condoms, they also shifted to online platforms, no, for clients to make orders. And then they set up yung pick up and delivery of ARV medication and condoms, no? So now the requests are being made online, no, or via phone or the internet. Tapos yung mga ibang CBO partners natin also developed yung mga mobile apps nila with a map, no, showing saan ba yung mga ARV medication distribution points, etc. As for yung basic needs naman, no, of course yung ongoing call for donors, no, and volunteers. So ito yung mga sample nung delivery and pick-up services na pinrovide ng ating mga CBO partners. Ang magandang i-note dito is that when they talk about pick-up and delivery points, si client ang pumipili, no, kung saan yung pick up and delivery points nila, which is good kasi nga na-address niya yung concerns regarding privacy and confidentiality kasi yung iba sa atin, 'di ba, hindi alam ng family nila or ng mga kasama nila sa trabaho na they are living with HIV. So they have the option to say, sige, sa kanto na lang, no, instead na sa bahay niyo i-deliver, I'll just meet you sa kanto. Or di kaya i-meet na lang kita dun sa specific na pick up or delivery drop off na point. No? Ito yung sample ng maps na dinevelop ng ating CBO partners, at specific talaga siya dun sa mga medication, no, natin. And ito yung map naman ng social hygiene clinics natin. This is very useful, especially I guess dun sa mga tao na napunta or na who got stuck in areas na hindi sila familiar with. So say for example, again, if you're living in Metro Manila, mas familiar ka doon, pero because of the pandemic, you were forced to go back and go home to the province. So doon makikita mo na meron pala sa amin dito, no? Yes, no. So HIV-focused community-based organizations were quick to respond to the dual epidemic of HIV and COVID-19. And the reason is because they have worked closely and still continue to work closely with the PLHIV community in identifying challenges and in developing solutions to address yung challenges na ito, no. Kasi nga, di ba, lagi nating sinasabi, ang solutions dapat ay nanggagaling sa mga tao na pinaka-affected nung isang problema, no. So it's good that the CBOs are really working closely. I would even dare to say that most of the HIV and HIV efforts and COVID-19 efforts na na nakatulong sa PLHIV natin were done by CBOs. More than I would say more than the government, no. Tayo yung pinaka-core kumbaga kasi tayo yung mas pinakamalapit dun sa community natin. No, so some lessons and directions, no. Ito yung article na sinulat namin ng mga kasama ko sa UP tsaka sa Brown. Just to reflect on, you know, what have we learned from our experience of the dual epidemic and what can we do moving forward, no? In terms of policy, no, naisip natin na or nire-recommend natin na we need to revisit the HIV policy, no. Alam ko kaka-update lang niya nung 2018, 2019, pero marami pa rin kung titingnan natin yung policy, medyo marami pa rin tayong pwedeng idagdag, no. We need to revisit it, especially in terms of access to ARV medication, no. Nakita natin during the pandemic, malaking tulong yung i-allow natin yung PLHIV natin to access their medications sa kahit saang treatment hub, no. They don't need to be affiliated to the treatment hub. So sana ma-update natin yon. And also yung mga naka-red, ito yung mga personal yung nasa wish list ko siya, no. Sana ma-expand natin yung policy to include PrEP and PEP. PrEP has recently, or this is pre-exposure prophylaxis and post-exposure prophylaxis. PrEP has recently been added to the national formulary, no. So ibig sabihin pwede na tayo mag-distribute, may mandate na rin ang government to purchase yung PrEP and distribute. Sana ma-include na rin siya dun sa policy natin, no. Another lesson and direction under policy is siguro kailangan pang i-increase yung budget natin for provision of HIV services, no. Yung OHAT, malaking tulong siya for PLHIV, at least for those who are nagko-contribute sa kanilang PhilHealth, no. Maraming services na nako-cover yung OHAT. HIV services via CBOs are mainly reliant on donor support and volunteers, and I think that the government has to, you know, play a bigger role in terms of providing financial support to cover HIV services. Another is may mandate sana to include HIV and sexual health in school curriculum. Alam ko meron tayong mga existing policies regarding this, pero yung siguro mas strengthen yung implementation. Medyo doon kasi tayo mahina, no, as a country. We have very good laws, we have very good policies. We fail lang doon sa implementation natin, no? So revisit natin dapat 'yon. In terms of service implementation, our recommendation is for us to retain the provision of online services, no, yung consultations, counseling, and for other concerns. However, we have to make sure that mapoprotect natin yung patient confidentiality, no, kaya kailangan gumamit tayo ng secure na online platforms, yung mga encrypted na platforms, no. And also, we need to train more doctors and specialists on how to provide online care services for PLHIV. It's good that we have a lot of volunteers, no? Nung pandemic, nakikita natin ang daming call for mga mental health na volunteers, etc. And that's good, no? But we have to also make sure that the volunteers are trained, no? And also, yung ratio na available ng doctors and specialists to PLHIV might be too low for online consultation since majority of doctors are doing clinic-based practice. Ito yung nabigay na comment ng mga doctors na nakausap namin na iilan lang sa kanila yung trained din to address needs of people living with HIV, no? So magandang ma-train sila regarding that, no? Hindi yung general lang na training, no? Dapat medyo specific din to HIV if they're going to handle HIV clients. Also, no, magandang ma-retain yung pick-up and delivery services for ARV medication. The DOH should provide free or low-cost ARV delivery services. This is again covered by OHAT, pero kasi during the pandemic lang yun. I'm not so sure if after ba ng pandemic, they will still continue covering the cost for deliveries, no? Maganda rin yung ginamit or ginawa ng mga CBOs natin during the pandemic, yung meron silang mga nagbabike na volunteers or mga volunteers who use their personal vehicles to deliver, no? We just, I guess, need to find a way to make sure that information is protected, no? To maintain confidentiality and privacy. And again, yung mga naka-read, ito yung mga nasa wish list ko, no? I really hope that at some point in the future, we can set up a one-stop shop for HIV-related services. Ang nakikita kasi natin is yung services na pinoprovide natin, hiwa-hiwalay. So, kunwari, punta sa isang clinic for HIV testing, punta sa isang clinic for X-ray or whatever laboratories, punta sa isang clinic for mental health services or counseling. Parang yung biyahe pa lang, no, nagiging barrier na siya, no, nagiging challenge na siya for the PLHIV to access those services. Maganda na meron tayong one-stop shop para isang punta lang, no, isa-isang building, nandun na lahat, nandun na si X-ray, nandun na si mental health provider, nandun na si viral load testing, nandun na si HIV testing, and all the other HIV-related services para isahang punta lang, no? And also, I hope that we can expand and strengthen efforts and capacity outside of Metro Manila. If you look at the services, no, meron naman tayo sa outside of Metro Manila, pero karamihan pa rin ng services and even funding is still funneled into institutions within Metro Manila, no? Maganda na ma-share naman natin siya sa ibang provinces natin. And this is good, no? This activity by SHIP is really good kasi they've been training CBOs around the Philippines, no? And that's a really good way of increasing capacity, no? Natin. And increasing access also to HIV trained professionals outside of Metro Manila. In terms of research, ang recommendation sana natin is for us to expand yung assessment of needs of PLHIV as well as the existing HIV programs. Isa to sa napapansin natin dun sa mga programs natin, especially during the pandemic, no. Maganda na nagre-react tayo agad, nakakapag-respond tayo agad. Pero maganda rin sana kung na-evaluate natin yung programs kasi marami sa programs natin ay effective naman, no, nakakatulong naman. It's just that we need proof that they actually work, no? Para makita din natin ano pa yung kulang, what worked, what did not work, para pag next time na i-implement natin yung same service na yon, alam natin how to improve it. And also, when we have evaluation ng ating mga programs, mas madali tayong maka-request for funding. Kasi kaya nating lumapit sa mga funding agencies, kaya nating lapitan yung government and say, this is what we did, this is, ito yung results, no? This is what worked, and this is what we propose to do in the future, no? So, yun, kailangan natin siyang i-improve yung ating evaluation ng ating programs, no? And then, for research, no, it's important that I'm not sure if there are researchers here, I'm pretty sure meron naman dito, no? If you're conducting research, no, it's important to involve the PLHIV community and the community-based organizations who are working with the PLHIV community and other stakeholders throughout the research process. Madalas kasi napapansin ko, and ito nakikita ko siya, because I do research, no, nakikita ko siya sa aking mga kasama at minsan nakakalungkot na makikita mo na sinasama lang nila yung CBOs at yung PLHIV during the research process, pag nag-interview na, pag nagde-data collection na, tapos wala na after, no? Nakakalungkot yon kasi dapat ini-include natin sila, ini-involve natin sila dun sa development ng research, sa conduct ng research, sa pag-share or disseminate ng results ng research, and more importantly, dun sa paggamit ng results ng research na yun to improve, no, yung services natin na binibigay sa PLHIV community, no? So they have to be involved throughout the process. No. So some concluding thoughts lang. no? Some concluding thoughts lang. Basahin ko yung aking uh, yung aking sinulat, no. I think it's first important to recognize yung problems and challenges in our society and to mobilize, no, yung people and other resources to address these problems and challenges, no. Kung titingnan natin dun sa experience natin, this is what really helped the community-based organizations adapt their services, no, recognized recognized it, and then they mobilized, no. Second is to emphasize the need for a holistic and collaborative and innovative approach to health problems. No, all agencies and organizations and communities have to be involved, again, in the planning and development of solutions to health problems, as well as in the implementation of those solutions. No, for CBOs, no, what worked was them partnering with government, no, with other CBOs and community volunteers, and that's been very helpful, no. For researchers, it should be the same. No, we have to partner with the community, with the CBOs, with the government, etc. No, and lastly, no, I want to emphasize that no effort is too small, no, in helping address the dual epidemic of HIV and COVID in our country. We need all hands on deck. No, as with any problem naman na kinakaharap natin as a community, no, everyone's contribution is really valuable. So with that, I end my presentation. So muli, maraming pong salamat.